Casual Birder podcast, a show for people interested in wild birds. I'm Susie Buttress. As a casual birder, I try to find time to watch birds as I go about my daily tasks. Join me each week to hear about the birds I've seen, interviews with others, and stories from listeners around the world. Spring is in the air in the Northern Hemisphere, and returning, along with the longer daylight hours, are the songs and calls of birds seeking mates and marking out territories. This time of year is incredibly exciting to me. Buds are blossoming on the trees, and the first early daffodils are in bloom, and it feels like the warmer days of early summer can't be too far away. I was born in the spring, and I know from past experience that in southern England we can have snow up until late April. But for now, I'll keep my fingers crossed that the winter is behind us. Last week, I travelled to London for work, and as I returned home in the early evening with a beautiful soft pink sunset, I could hear goldfinches while I waited for the train. Looking around me, I wondered how many others were enjoying the song. It's times like these that I wish more people took time to notice the natural world. I feel they're missing so much. You never know what birds you'll find or what drama you might observe. Do let me know what changes you're noticing, whether spring is on the way, like it is here, or whether you're heading into autumn in the Southern Hemisphere. I'm joined this week by long-time listener and former guest, Jeremy Schwartz, and his colleague, Jeff Morgenroth. They've taken their interest in birding and created a card game that they hope will not only be fun to play, but will teach people about the birds they might see in the Pacific Northwest where they live. Jeff and Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me on the Casual Birder podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So, Jeremy, you've been a guest before, and we were talking about the ducks that you've seen.
Right, yeah. I remember when it was back in fall, I think I was talking about ducks and the similarities between the types of ducks named teals and types of ducks named widgeons.
And you're quite a keen birder from what you've told me and from your sightings that you've sent into the show.
Yeah, I describe myself as that. Yeah, probably a few tiers above sort of the casual birder level. But yeah, I enjoy quite a bit. I try to get out during lunchtime at my office whenever I can, and on the weekends whenever I can. I'm a part of a few local birding Facebook groups in my home area of Washington State in the Seattle area. But yeah, I enjoy it quite a bit. And spring is springing, and it's quite exciting for birders like me to begin to hear everybody out and singing and doing their thing.
Absolutely. And Jeff, you're, I understand, a little bit more of a casual birder like myself. Can you tell me a little bit about the sort of birding you do?
Sure, yeah. And, I don't think had you asked me this question several months ago, I would have been able to articulate it. But since I've been becoming more exposed to the hobby of birding, I've kind of discovered that for me, it's a much more personal activity. Jeremy and I are pretty good friends, and he's the hobbyist, and he keeps a lot of lists and knows all the hot spots in the region. I've kind of just sort of naturally found them as I go out for walks with my dog or my wife or whatever, and enjoying the birds that are sort of all around in our various environments that we have here around Seattle. But for me, it's always just been sort of a quiet pleasure and something that I haven't ever structured or formalized in a way that a lot of birders do. But it gives me a lot of satisfaction and just that sort of connection to nature that I think we all sort of feel, but not in a way that has connected me to a big community. So I have, maybe a slightly different perspective than Jeremy, but something that I think as we talk more, maybe a lot of your listeners will be able to connect to.
It's exciting to speak to someone else that's a casual birder because Jeremy is very knowledgeable.
He's the bird nerd.
So, Jeff, have you been out on the birding walks that I know Jeremy has organised for the office?
Oh, yeah. He has so many that I don't go to all of them. But yeah, whenever I don't have my own work duties and I'm able to attend, we go out as a group. And we've done sort of, he's called it citizen science, where he has some, Jeremy, what's the organization that you connect with through the app to get your list?
Sure. Yeah. The tool, I think something I mentioned to Susie when we first chatted all those months ago was the tool is called eBird, and it's organized or maintained by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology in Cornell, New York State in the U.S. And it's a citizen science sourced database that allows bird sightings from all over the world to be input based on specific hotspots. So, like, for example, there's a hotspot right near our office that I'll go out and submit checklists of birds to on a fairly regular basis. So, yeah, that's the tool there.
While Jeremy has his smartphone out and he's cataloging how many robins he sees and how many juncos are flittering about and entering them into this database, I'm just like, oh, look. Oh, yeah, there's some juncos. There's a heron. Cool.
Excellent. I do want to thank Jeremy for talking about the eBird app, because I had vaguely known of it, but I've, since speaking with him, used it myself when I've been traveling to new locations. I've checked it out to see what I might see in that area, and you can sort it by the month so you can get an idea of what birds might be in the area. But also, I've started to keep more lists and to actually enter my sightings. So he's an inspiration to us all.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Now your birding has taken you into a slightly new direction with this backyard birding game that you've designed. Would you like to tell us about that?
Basically, I'm a sort of amateur game maker as a passion and hobby of mine, and I have a literal basement that's just packed with all these game ideas that I've sort of developed to one level of working prototype or another. And one of them was kind of a simple collecting game where players would compete to collect animals to their little collections. And it was kind of rough around the edges, and I just didn't have the gusto to polish it off or to finish it. And this would have been 3-4 years ago. And as Jeremy and I started going on our bird walks and just sort of becoming, friends at work, I just sort of had the idea, maybe I'm feeling inspired to start a new project. And this old animal game that I had made, which at the time of this occurring was kind of every different kind of animal you could think of. So there were some reptiles, there were some birds, there were some mammals. What if I took that game and really refined it and polish it and smooth the rough edges that I had never really worked out before to create something that could actually be more fun and more playable? So Jeremy came over and we just sort of played through the old version of the game, and we were both sort of immediately struck by how quick the game could be revised to be themed around birds, and what we could do to add to the rules as they were currently left to make it a lot more interesting and educational, and actually, I don't want to say scientific, but just more true to life. And that sort of began the project. And as we worked on it more, I pitched to him the idea of, what if we actually produced really high quality versions of all the cards and tried to get it funded on Kickstarter, which, if you don't know, it's a crowdfunding platform where people can post all kinds of projects that they're excited about and basically kind of test the waters out there in the world to see if there's enthusiasm and interest for something, as opposed to investing the capital to make the game, print it, and then try to do the cold calls to game stores to get it on the shelves. Kickstarter is allowing us to kind of see if there's enthusiasm for this without a lot of risk to either us or the people that are backing us currently. So that was sort of the genesis of the project. And in the time since then, we've been doing a lot of prototyping and play testing and formal design to make the game itself play really well, but to also make the cards look really good and actually be something that people who are getting excited about birds could use as a learning tool to be able to identify them a lot easier as they are walking around the region and trying to get into the hobby.
So could you tell me a little bit, without giving too much away, about how the game is played?
Sure. So it's for 2 to 6 players. It's all ages. When I say all ages, I mean kids, maybe 8 years old or up. But there's not a lot of reading involved. It's mostly matching icons and symbols and things. So you could play with all kinds of little kids. But from a gameplay standpoint, it's essentially a competition to attract the most birds to your backyard. And the game begins by first picking a season. So summer, winter, fall, whatever. And that's going to determine how many points each bird is worth. The idea being that birds that are more likely to visit your feeder or for you to see out and about as you go on your walks, they're going to be worth more points. So it kind of trains you to be attentive to certain birds that are going to be in your area based on the season. So players draw a hand of cards from a shared deck. We call them the backyard cards. And on the back of each card is an item that you would find either in nature or something that you'd put in your backyard. So, for example, there's seeds, bushes and flowers, trees, wetlands, insects, all kinds of stuff. And the idea is that birds are going to be drawn every turn in sort of a shared pool that we call the flock. And it's just kind of in the center of the table. And then players take turns using those backyard cards that they've drawn to attract certain birds. So, for example, you might get a handful of waterfowl out, you might get a woodpecker, you might get some finches, etc. And you need to pick which bird you want to attract to your backyard and then play the right card. So this act of repetition teaches you when the bird is going to be around throughout the year. So you seasonally, you'll know when to keep your eyes open, what the bird wants to eat, and where the bird is most likely to live. And at the end of the game, whomever has collected the most points worth of birds is the winner.
Fantastic. That sounds amazing. And as you said, educational, because as long as you know what season you're in, you'll know what kind of birds you're likely to see in the different locations. How many birds do you cover in the game?
I think we have just under 40.
I was just looking at our site a few hours ago. So it's 38 birds, and they are all relatively easily findable in our Pacific Northwest kind of home where we live. It's not that they're all native and only found here. A lot of the birds are found across the U.S., but they're all easily findable in the Pacific Northwest.
How cool, though, because it'll also give people that might be interested in the birds that you get that they don't see.
It's one of the things we were glad of, too, as we worked our way through it, is, this could really work as not just an educational tool for people who live here, but also for if someone is thinking of visiting or they're into birds and they want to do kind of a tour of the main regions of the U.S., for example, they could potentially have this and use it as an educational resource in addition to something that's just fun to play.
Absolutely. And I'm already envisioning all the add-on packs that you'll be able to have when it's successfully out there in the world. You mentioned in our email conversation that one of the things you wanted to do was, apart from producing this game, is to support local birding organisations. So could you tell me a little bit about that angle?
Yeah, I can touch on that a little. We've partnered with, and sort of just a simple sponsorship collaboration model with the Seattle Audubon Society, and they've been helpful in promoting our game on their various social media channels. And in fact, we're going to be doing a live play demonstration event at their nature shop, and they've graciously allowed us to take it over for a few hours on a Saturday and get people to play it. We're also reaching out to other Audubon societies in that way to see if this is something they'd consider supporting or consider sharing, because one of the things we were thankful to learn throughout as we started our Kickstarter campaign about a year ago was that this game really shines when people play it and people get to see people playing it. And so we're excited for the opportunity to be able to share it with as many both bird fans and game fans as we can.
With the Kickstarter, what sort of stage are you at?
Well, we launched it on March 15th, and then it gives us a 30-day window with which to generate pledges. So that means that the cutoff date, and listeners, you'll want to write this down, is Sunday, April 14th. We're about a third of the way done with the campaign, and we're about a third of the way there. So we're on track.
That's excellent to hear. And yes, this episode will go out during that period. So I hope that our listeners will take a look at your Kickstarter site. The links will be in the show notes.
And something, Susie, I wonder if I could just point out too, is just simply sharing the Kickstarter. Our Facebook page itself is also super important. If you for whatever reason can't support financially, we'd still love just the word of mouth, because that's one of the most important things for Kickstarters overall, not just ours, is the kind of word of mouth, organic kind of interest that simply sharing something on Facebook or telling your friends about this kind of cool Kickstarter project they heard of at a cafe or at work or anything like that. So share and share often is kind of what we've been promoting too, if the pledge can't happen.
Absolutely. And I have to say that goes as well for podcasts. It means such a lot because it helps people find both your game, your Kickstarter, helps people find the podcast.
Susie, I have just kind of an insight that I think speaks to that. There was a really cool experience that Jeremy and I had when we play tested the game for it was sort of like the reveal party for family and friends at my home in Woodinville, where basically we had like 25 people over and I barbecued for everybody, and we had 3 copies of the game running, and we invited everybody. Like, we weren't like discretionary picking out only people who are into birds. It was sort of like, what people do we like that think could give us good feedback and we want to share with, et cetera. And it was amazing how many people really just sort of came alive when they got into this idea of birding. And that's why I think it speaks to the work that you do as well as our little game here. And that once you start to kind of enter this world and enjoy birds and really just kind of get outside and have fun with people, it's so cool to discover these little niche forms of media and entertainment and fellowship that you can have with people.
Yeah, and a little anecdote I have from that playtest that Jeff mentioned. We put out a little questionnaire at the end of the event itself, just to get some feedback. And one of the questions we asked was, I think it was, what was one thing you learned, or what was the most exciting thing that came about in your specific game? And I remember one response specifically was just, I had never even known a bird called an American coot even existed, but it's in your game, so now I know that. And it was just such this just wonderful organic kind of thing that this person learned, didn't even know that type of bird existed, much less seen one in the wild. And now that person would potentially be able to ID it and think back to our game and carry that little nugget about the natural world around with them.
That's amazing, isn't it? And that shows the educational aspect, that you may just think of children learning about things, but actually we're all open to learning all the time. So what are the next steps then? So you've got the Kickstarter open. So if you achieve your Kickstarter funding, you then go into production?
Yeah, basically. I mean, we have the digital files of all the cards ready to go. Like literally all we have to do is get the funds to give to the manufacturer for them to print up the copies. They're then shipped out to everybody that supported us, and then the game is kind of a real thing. You know, it's out there in the world and people are playing it. But mine and Jeremy's immediate goal is not to, print thousands and thousands of copies and then start selling these at conventions and go to retailers, though, because at this point, it really is sort of a passion project. We were just two guys who liked games and are enthusiastic about birds and thought that this would be a really cool, fun thing to share. So the money that we're collecting from our pledges on the Kickstarter page are really just sort of paying for the project. But if there's a lot of enthusiasm and, the people start kicking in the door once they listen to this and once they come to all of our other events, Jeremy and I are totally open to, like you kind of suggested, Susie, different regional variants of the game, or even a game that uses the same mechanics but not necessarily bird themed. To be honest, the first thing that Jeremy and I sort of thought of when we finished our first real discussion on this was like, yeah, wouldn't a dinosaur game be really cool? So, at this point, we're kind of focused on just getting this short run of backyard birding out and seeing how it goes.
Well, that's amazing. I've not really understood how these games come about. So it's really interesting because it's on a topic that I'm really excited about anyway. And, I have to admit, I'm a little bit competitive. So the chance of playing something like that is going to be very interesting to me.
Jeff has mentioned a few times in various playtests or kind of talking about the game is that sometimes it just comes down to a race for the pileated woodpecker, which is featured in the game, or one of the types of hummingbirds, because those are what we've found typically the most popular bird. No matter the season, people just want that hummingbird in their collection, or they just want that big, gorgeous woodpecker in their collection. It can sometimes just come down to 2 or 3 birds.
Oh, wow. That old pileated woodpecker, that's definitely one that is on my list. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, they're definitely making themselves known now with it being spring. You just started spring in our neck of the woods, and you can really hear them from yards away. It feels like sometimes, because their call is just so emphatic and so, I've heard it described as maniacal before. It's really hard to not notice if they're doing it.
So if you're in the woods and you hear a maniacal laugh, it's okay. It's a woodpecker.
It's a woodpecker. Yeah, unless you're an oak tree, you don't need to run.
Or a fence, I've heard. I remember long-term listener Alan from Savannah has had some interactions with a pileated woodpecker in his fence. So I do know that there's that issue. Thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us about your game. I urge the listeners to go along to your Kickstarter page. So what is the link?
Well, it might be easiest for your listeners just to go to our website, which is www.backyardbirdinggame.com. And we have a big link that'll take you right to our Kickstarter from there. our kind of introductory video to learn more about the game there too. We've got a lot of stuff on the website, including a great blog that Jeremy's been putting a ton of content up.
And if someone wanted to just simply visit Kickstarter.com, like the main site for Kickstarter, and search backyard birding, it'll be the first item that comes up, the first project that comes up. So 2 pretty easy ways to find us on Kickstarter. Like Jeff mentioned, those how to play videos are also featured on the Kickstarter page itself, and should be able to learn everything you need to.
That's fantastic. And I'm so impressed with you taking your excitement for birding to something like this and finding other ways to enthuse people with it. I wish you all the best with the campaign, and especially because I now want to see the dinosaur version. So we have to get that successful to get to that stage. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Susie, for having us on. We greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Susie.
Find out more about the Backyard Birding Game at their website, www.backyardbirdinggame.com. And you can view their instruction video and read more about the gameplay there. You'll also find links to the Kickstarter campaign and their Facebook page. The Kickstarter ends on 14th of April 2019. If you are able to, it would be wonderful if you could support the Kickstarter, but if you're not able to pledge any money, Jeremy and Jeff would be really grateful if you could share their Kickstarter link to your friends. I wish them every success with the game. I'd love to know what birds you've seen this week. Join our Facebook group to discuss this week's episode, or post your photos of the birds you've seen. I really do enjoy hearing your tales, so come and join the conversation there. Find us at facebook.com/groups/Casual Birder Podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Casual Birder Pod or on Instagram at Casual Birder Podcast. And you can email me at casualbirderpod@gmail.com. Make sure you don't miss any episodes by subscribing to the show. Subscribing is free and you can do it wherever you listen. If you enjoy the show, please consider posting about it on social media. As I said in the show, personal recommendation is such a valuable way of helping others to listen. Thank you to Randy Braun for designing the artwork for the show. The theme music is Short Sleeved Shirt by The Drones. Thanks to them for letting me use it. Check out their website at www.dronesmusic.net. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll join me again for another episode of the Casual Birder Podcast.